finally went to my grandma, and my grandma was like a big fan, still is, of my dad.
Okay.
And she was like, "You are his twin, like his walking everything, the way I walk, the way I talk, the way I do things." Like, and I think that was a big resentment with my mom. I think that's kind of what it came from. Once I got older, I started to be like, "Oh, I remind you of him." Like, okay, I get it now. And my grandma was like, "He's well, he's fine." Like, I think she low key was talking to him, but she didn't want to, because my mom was very toxic, and the thing, like, their relationship was, strained, and she didn't want my mom to cut her out of our lives by ruffling any feathers. So my grandma would like low key be like, just wait, like everything's fine. And then when it happened, and I went with him, we immediately clicked. We were the same person, so it was fine. But it was very like I'm born and raised here. I've had all my friends. I go to school here. I just lost my best friend, and now you're shipping me off with this man
Who is a stranger?
who
He's
is a
your father, but he's
stranger.
your stranger.
Hey guys, welcome to Little Black Bird 91. I know you're probably thinking about this. How does this answer the question about Nick Cannon? Well, actually, I've watched a lot more of this particular interview, and there's a lot more she says about her mother and her father. First and foremost, she was 12 when she first met her father. Her mother was a toxic mother who actually created a lot of distance between herself and her child, right? So between Brie and her mother, there was a lot of distance emotionally because the mother saw her as almost competition. Her mother was jealous of her. Her mother was leaving her to her own devices to figure things out. Right now, that is very concerning, and I'm going to do a whole live on this a little bit later on as well, right, or in the next few days. But why I think this is important is because I believe this feeds into the reason why that Brie would want to become part of Nick Cannon's, I like to call it quote unquote harem, and actually become a single mother, because that's what she became. She didn't become a mother who gave her child to Nick Cannon. No, she became a single mother, right? Who has a very rich husband, a very rich father, right? And the reason why she got into that space, I believe, is because the love that she received from her child left her in a chaotic state. And you guys have heard me talk about attachment styles before. Fearful, avoidant attachment style. When you grow up in a house of abandonment, betrayal, and rejection, where you grow up in a household where you are left to your own devices, you are afraid of your parent at the same time kind of loving your parent, and the parent is a source of comfort at the same time a source of fear. But the chaos becomes addictive, and also we then if we have not healed, we then replicate some of the same patterns we've existed in our adult relationships. This situation between her and Nick Cannon is something that is quite interesting, right? Because there is distance between her and Nick Cannon. Regardless of whether Nick Cannon can get around to all the women if he wants to, there's going to be some level of emotional and physical distance, replicating what she actually experienced as a child. Now, I said fearful avoidant, but this is an avoidant trait in general. And potentially it could be she's more dismissive on that particular spectrum. And so when you hear her talk about the situation between her as her mother, her father, and herself, you hear that she grew up in a way that quote unquote seemed rebellious. All it was that she became very hyper independent because she no longer could trust the parent. Let's listen a bit more.
I don't know you. Like, what is happening? So it was a very weird experience, because I think that in that moment, it was when I officially turned off all emotion. It was in that moment that I was like, you know what? I have shit to do. I need to get the fuck out of living with this man. I need to get out of this house. I need to like figure out what I'm gonna do with my life. Like, and it just
And when did she turn it back on? Turning it off, I believe she hasn't turned it all the way back on. Because you see, to allow yourself to be in a position where you would want to have a baby by Nick Cannon, irrespective of the money, she can look after herself financially, right? She can look after herself financially right now. So the finances wasn't the issue. The issue is emotional safety and the way that we look at emotional safety. Sometimes our behavior is contradictory to emotional safety. It feels safe because it's a survival technique that we're utilizing, but we're not thriving emotionally in that space. Now, when you put yourself in a situation, I keep saying put yourself because that's what she did. Put yourself in a situation where you're willing to have a child with somebody who is not going to necessarily be present and available all the time and is creating families all across the world, more America than anything, but creating families across the board, right? And you're not going to be number one priority. Why does one do that? Women intrinsically want to be a priority. Why would you put yourself in a place where you're not a priority? Because you're hurt. And because the way that you look at life is damaged. And it has been damaged because of what the parents had put her through, or i.e., more her toxic mother put her through, right? And so she then has to turn off her emotions, meaning now her decisions now are not that they don't have any emotion to them, but more or less she doesn't consider the emotional impact. So she didn't consider the emotional impact to herself and that child having a kid with Nick Cannon who would have several other families. She's now realizing it because at the end of the interview she says how it can be a little bit difficult. But this is an indication of why she had to become part of Nick Cannon's roster of baby mothers, because actually she's detached. And because of her being detached, this allows her to be able to make a decision where the relationship is replicating detachment. Because Nick Cannon's not attached, right? So in essence, yes, she's a strong mother who is caring for her child, but she robs the child of having the strong father because her choices are based on detachment, not on a healed vision and way of looking at stuff. In fact, Nick Cannon is a mirror because the reason why he does what he does is because of what he suffered, the abandonment, the rejection, the betrayal at a young age. He also had to grow up with his grandmother because his parents, because of his parents' situation. So you can see how mirrors are meeting each other and then making decisions based on what they are feeling. This is important. This is a bit more.
Just even made it even quicker that I had escalated my growth and lost my adolescence and innocence in like all senses. So when I moved there, I just was miserable. I absolutely hated Orange County. I still hate Orange County, but I literally was like, "Oh, this is awful." And my dad was great. He tried, but he just didn't know what to do with me. And at that age,
Right.
God bless.
That's a critical
Critical.
age. Yeah, for
Yeah,
any
absolutely.
boy girl, but it's
Yeah.
critical. So how long were you with your father?
I was there a year before he sent me to boot camp.
Are you serious? Boot camp?
Oh yeah, yeah. I was a lot. I was a force. And what's so funny is to this day, I swear on everything I love, I've never done a drug in my life. Like I'm not even like I'm wild, but it was more of just like you can't tell me anything. Like I want to do what I want to do, and he was just scared. Like he like didn't know what to do with me, and he was like,
Now, it may sound like she's just a free spirit. She's somebody who, it just knows what she wants. And she was from a young age was so spirited. No, she was abandoned. She was forced into this position. She was forced into a position of independence. She had to figure it out. Many children who grow up in a house where the mother specifically or the main caregiver specifically, right, treats them like an enemy, automatically creates distance between the child and the parent. And what that does is it forces a child to realize they cannot depend on that parent. They cannot depend on the parent to love them and care for them, so they have to defend themselves. So by the time she gets to her father at 12 years old, she is already grown in maturity in some aspects when it comes to how she feels about herself and how she defends herself. So she can't be controlled because in reality, when she gives over that power to allow you to defend her, protect her, and care for her, she may be disappointed all over again. She may be hurt all over again. And so actually, this is really an indication of her showing that hyper independence. Why she then chose Nick Cannon to then have those kids with? Well, because then she would get all the freedom and all the power to do so. If he's not going to be available all the time, she can be herself. She can mother how she wants to be mothered. She can't be told what to do. She has nobody to report to. Very much like when she was a kid. She's not going to let you tell her what to do. And that's why she's in a situation with Nick Cannon. That's why Nick Cannon chose her, because he recognized that hyper independence. He recognized that he could leave her alone and go away. That's the manipulation he was talking about, that he recognizes people. And he does, because he recognizes himself. And that's why I said about these things, I don't just look at Nick Cannon, I look at the women too, because actually they are mirrors of each other. And the person who's manipulating actually doesn't realize that as they're manipulating someone else, that person's a mirror of you. The reason why they even want to be, you see, to be conned, we have to want to be conned. To be tempted, we have to want to be tempted. The Bible says about temptation comes from within. It's something that is within you already. Her need to have power and control over her own life to make the decisions she wants to make may be contradictory to how she also feels wanting to be cared for and loved, but she may not feel safe being able to give someone that room to do so. So she met somebody else who was willing to give her what she wanted, the child, and to leave her alone. But the problem is, it does get tiring. And after a while, you realize that's actually not what you really wanted, because you were in survival mode when you said you wanted those things. And when you got it, you realize it didn't take you out of survival mode. It didn't fulfill you the same way you wanted to.
I don't think she's doing anything, but like she's also trying to stay out till 2 a.m. and she's trying to act like she's 20 and like I don't know what to do with her. So he sent me to my aunt, who was actually going through chemo, going through a lot. She literally lived in the middle of nowhere in the woods of Texas. And that's where he sent me. He was like, you guys figure this out. And from there, but also she's very blunt and harsh. We're very similar. Like the whole family is identical.
Okay.
So he was like, you're still gonna learn everything I want you to learn, and you're still gonna be able to take care of yourself different than most females based on who's raising you. And so she was still the best person looking back to be with for sure.
Do you feel like you did not have a childhood?
Absolutely. Yeah, without question. I joke about it all the time. Like people talk about kids movies or this or that. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. Like I didn't do any of that.
Cartoon.
So she didn't get to have a childhood. That in itself is we have to do that in another video. Not having a childhood where you can't actually just be a kid, and I call it just be. When you don't know how to just be, your value comes from not being able to stand still. It comes from movement. You always have to move. You always have to prove. You always have to show that you're worthy. You always have to try and prove to everybody that you can't be messed with, because that's all you've ever known. You've never been protected emotionally, physically. And so you are surrendering to the survival instincts that you have, and whatever you picked up from that environment. So you're the only person who can defend you. So it's hard to be loved and receive love, because in reality that requires you to surrender to some degree. And you can't surrender because that would mean then allowing that person to protect you and putting trust in them. But remember, avoidance is all about distrust for other people. You trust yourself highly, but you distrust other people. In fact, I'm going to do the whole breakdown of this video properly, because I feel like I need to go deeper with the attachment styles. But I wanted to just break this as why I believe that why she decided to actually have the child with Nick Cannon is because of her independence. And Nick Cannon gives her that. But hey, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're somebody who also is going through this, where you feel like you're so hyper independent, you never had a childhood, you felt like you had to protect yourself, you always had to be in a space of, looking after you. No one really looked after you. Then listen, this is the time to reach out to me in my coaching, because we discuss this all the time with my coaching clients. I do this all the time. We break this down all the time. And when we break down those barriers, we start teaching you, how do you be able to trust other people first and foremost. The first thing you have to trust is actually you. The actual trust of you actually isn't a trust of you. It's actually a distrust of you, right? And I'll break it down in coaching what that actually really means. But hey, make sure you like, share, subscribe, click on that bell button for notifications of the uploads. We appreciate you. Stay locked, loaded. We'll see